This is a 2011 Chevy Tahoe, and it's going to get a new set of front struts and rear shocks. Let's get to it. Okay, with the rear tire out of the way, we're going to remove this plastic fender liner. You can change the shocks without removing it, but for the purpose of filming, and it makes it a little bit easier, you'll see in a minute here, to access that top bolt. We're going to pull this out. It just takes a minute to pull it out. It's got a handful of these plastic push pins holding it in, and we've got a few 7mm bolts around the perimeter here. So we'll get those out. We'll get this out of the way. Since we're disconnecting the shock, the axle is going to want to drop down, so I'm going to place a jack underneath the pumpkin just to provide a little bit of support. Both the bolt and the nut on this are 21mm or 13/16. So here's the top bolt for the shock right here. This can be a little bit tricky to get on the back side. This is the nut. There's no there's nothing holding it on the back side, so you got to get a wrench or a socket in there. You can do it with a wrench, or I'm sorry, with a socket and a ratchet. But I have this bent old antique wrench. I don't even know where I even got this thing. You can see it's bent, and it works perfect for this. I just cleaned up the inside a little bit. She was rusty, and it's almost like it was made for doing this. So the wrench will get so far, and then it'll hit this right here, and it'll stop, and it'll actually hold the bolt for you, so you can pull the nut off. It's always a good idea to do a parts comparison to make sure you're putting the right parts back on. These AC Delco shocks I actually bought on Amazon. I'll put a link to these in the description of the video. Look at that. Oil's running right out of that shock. Okay. We'll make sure and we'll sticker so this AC Delco sign is showing. We want people to know where their money went. I'm not going to tighten that up till I get the other bottom bolt started. So you can see the axle's hung about an inch lower, so it's necessary to put a jack or something under it. That's why I got that transmission jack. If you're doing this on your back in your garage, a regular floor jack will work just fine. We're just going to jack it up until our hole lines up and put our bolt through. Okay, we'll get our bent wrench in place. And again, you don't have to bend one of your wrenches. I just had this wrench. You could get in here with a socket and a ratchet if you wanted to. Okay, we'll put our splash shield back in place now. So with the tire and wheel out of the way, what we can see is the front actually has a strut. It's a shock and a strut. There's two bolts on the bottom. They come up through the bottom. The heads of them are 15 millimeter. I definitely suggest you put some penetrating oil on these, or else these little nuts here will just snap off and you'll be mad at yourself. And then up top there's three nuts. They're 18 millimeter right there. There's one back there, and there's one on this side. Two of the three, I can dig this out for you. Two of the three had these little dealios stuck to the top, like that right there. You just pry those off. That just locates the wire loom in place. Just pop those off with a pry bar. Get them out of your way. guess I'm pretty fortunate to be able to say that the new front struts come with new bolts, and that's probably why. And make sure my gun was going in the right direction. We got one of them came out. And to reiterate, these are all 18 millimeter, but they look pretty rusty too, so we're going to give them a healthy dose of some penetrating oil. Two out of the three. Okay, 3 out of 3. Okay, the only thing left holding the strut in place is friction, basically. So I'm going to stick my pry bar underneath it and just pry it forward. Well, maybe I won't. Normally you can, but because that bolt broke, I'm going to have to pry up a little bit. Normally when the bolt doesn't break, you just pry them forward and they'll pop right out of there, but this one wants to. That bolt's stuck in there, so it's going to fight with me. There we go. I think I got her loose. You bugger. That's exactly like worst case scenario. It's never this hard. Never say never. That bolt is just stuck in there, and it's not supposed to be. It's not a threaded hole where that bolt goes through. I got an idea. it's not stuck. Okay. So, let me back you up a little bit here. Okay, now that we got the strut loose, to get it out, we're going to drop it down, angle it back, and then pull it back out this way. Ideally. I always like to do a comparison to make sure I'm putting the right parts back in. Wait a second. Where's my bolts? I swear there was bolts. Okay, I just started a couple of the top nuts just to keep the strut from falling down. And then, as you can see down here, the strut is about a ½ inch shy of coming up and resting here. And that's because it's, for one, it's hanging loose, and for two, it's sprung, as is the suspension. There's a couple ways to go about this. You can just put a pry bar in here and pry the suspension down and pop it into place. I put my transmission jack back underneath it here, and I'm going to just use a 2x4 on its end like this, on its side, and pick this up just high enough so it pops into place here. You could use a floor jack, a jack stand, or you could use the pry bar, whatever. So I guess it's time for a new camera, because my camera, when I went to pause it between shots here, it was kind of set up. It wasn't doing anything. So I don't know how much of that recorded, but in a nutshell, I used a long screwdriver to come up through the control arm here to line up the bolt holes. And we're using the new bolts that came with the new struts. And these struts were bought off of Amazon. I don't remember what the brand was. I'll find out. The owner said they were about half the price. And I will put a link to those in the description as well. So that's all there is to it. It's pretty easy. If I can do it, so can you. Thanks for watching. I appreciate the support.